Imagine standing at the edge of a vast African plain 600,000 years ago. The golden savanna stretches before you, populated by creatures that would seem both familiar and alien to modern eyes. Among them walks a being that appears almost, but not quite, human. This being, our ancestor, carries something invisible, yet profound, something that separates them from every other creature that has ever existed on Earth. Something that defies easy explanation, even today, with all our scientific tools and knowledge. A brain in transition. Not yet the modern human mind, with its capacity for art, mathematics, and contemplating the stars, but no longer merely animal. Consciousness balancing on the knife edge between two worlds of being. The human brain. 3 pounds of folded tissue that contains the universe. The most complex object we know of in existence. The seat of everything we consider ourselves to be, our memories, dreams, fears, loves, and the very awareness reading these words. And yet, despite centuries of scientific inquiry, we still cannot fully explain how it came to be. The rapid expansion and reorganization of our ancestors' brains represents one of the most profound mysteries in evolutionary science. How did we, alone among Earth's millions of species, develop this extraordinary capacity for abstract thought? Why did our brains triple in size over a relatively brief span of evolutionary time, defying the normal pace of natural selection? This is the paradox at the heart of human existence, the inexplicable leap that transformed us from clever apes into beings capable of building civilizations, writing symphonies, and sending our thoughts across time itself. Tonight, we will journey through the misty corridors of deep time to examine what may be the greatest evolutionary mystery ever discovered. We'll explore competing theories that attempt to explain this unprecedented neural explosion. We'll examine fossil evidence that charts the physical transformation of our ancestors' skulls. And we'll confront the possibility that conventional evolutionary mechanisms may not fully account for what happened. Some researchers point to environmental pressures, changing climates forcing adaptation. Others suggest social complexity itself became the driving force, creating an evolutionary feedback loop that rewarded increasingly sophisticated cognition. But there are more speculative explanations as well. Could genetic mutations triggered by factors we don't yet understand have accelerated brain development beyond normal evolutionary timescales? Might cosmic rays have bombarded Earth during this critical period, inducing DNA changes? Or, as some have controversially proposed, could some external intervention have shaped our neural destiny? An encounter with something or someone that catalyzed our ascent to consciousness? The truth is, we don't know, and that uncertainty itself is revealing. In an age when science has mapped the human genome and photographed black holes, the origins of our own consciousness remain shrouded in mystery. This is not merely an academic question. To understanding how and why our brains evolved as they did may hold the key to comprehending consciousness itself, the final frontier of human knowledge. It may also reveal our possible futures. If we can identify the factors that accelerated brain evolution before, might we glimpse the next stage of human cognitive development? Are we still evolving? Could we direct that evolution? As we explore these questions, we'll encounter evidence that challenges our assumptions about human uniqueness. We'll learn about the ghostly presence of other human species who shared our evolutionary journey but ultimately vanished. We'll examine startling new discoveries that suggest our cognitive leap may have occurred earlier or later than previously believed. And we'll confront the possibility that the traditional narrative of steady, gradual progress may be fundamentally wrong. The implications extend beyond evolutionary biology. They touch on philosophy, religion, and our deepest sense of identity. If we cannot explain how we became what we are, can we truly understand what it means to be human? Throughout this journey, we'll rely on evidence, fossils, genetic analyses, archaeological findings, and comparative studies of modern primates. But we'll also embrace the wonder and uncertainty that make this question so compelling. For in that uncertainty lies the most profound truth of all, that despite our remarkable cognitive abilities, Despite our technologies and accumulated knowledge, we remain in many ways a mystery to ourselves. So join me as we travel back through the corridors of deep time to the moment when something extraordinary began to happen inside the brains of our ancestors. When a spark ignited that would, over thousands of generations, blossom into the flame of human consciousness. This is the story of how we became what we are. The story of the mysterious human brain explosion that nobody can fully explain. Chapter 2. The Improbable Mind. Why our evolution defies explanation. In the vast sweep of Earth's 4.5 billion-year history, human consciousness represents the briefest of moments, yet arguably its most significant development. The emergence of a species capable of contemplating its own existence, of preserving knowledge across generations, of manipulating its environment on a planetary scale, has no parallel. What makes the human brain explosion so perplexing to scientists is not merely that it happened, but the speed and extent to which it occurred. By evolutionary standards, the tripling of brain size in our lineage was extraordinarily rapid. Consider that for nearly the entire history of life on Earth, some 3.8 billion years, no species developed the capacity for complex language, technological innovation, or symbolic thought. Then, in what amounts to an evolutionary eye blink, one lineage developed all three. This defies conventional understanding of natural selection, which typically favors gradual changes occurring over vast timescales. Large brains are metabolically expensive. They consume approximately 20% of our energy, despite representing only 2% of our body weight. From a purely adaptive standpoint, such an energy-intensive organ should provide immediate survival benefits that outweigh its costs. Yet the most remarkable human cognitive abilities, art, philosophy, science, offer no obvious advantage for hunting prey or avoiding predators. The stakes of this mystery extend beyond academic curiosity. If we cannot explain our own emergence as conscious beings, we face profound limitations in understanding what consciousness itself actually is. Modern neuroscience can map brain activity with increasing precision. We can identify regions associated with specific functions and track the electrochemical signals that flow between neurons. At the explanatory gap between neural activity and subjective experience, what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness remains unbridged. Could solving the mystery of our brain's rapid evolution provide the key to understanding consciousness itself? Many researchers believe it might. The implications extend further still. If we identify the mechanisms that accelerated our cognitive evolution, could we potentially harness them? Might we someday direct our own neural development, enhancing capabilities or addressing neurological conditions? Conversely, does our inability to explain our cognitive emergence suggest fundamental limits to human understanding? Perhaps there are aspects of consciousness that will forever remain beyond our grasp, a humbling possibility for a species defined by its quest for knowledge. What makes this mystery particularly vexing is that it sits at the intersection of multiple disciplines: paleoanthropology, genetics, neuroscience, archaeology, climatology, and even astronomy. No single field holds all the answers. Paleoanthropologists study fossilized skulls, tracing the physical expansion of brain cases across hundreds of thousands of years. Geneticists search for mutations in ancient DNA that might have triggered neural development. Archaeologists sift through remnants of material culture, looking for evidence of symbolic thinking. Yet despite these combined efforts, definitive answers remain elusive. We can observe that the change occurred, but not precisely how or why. The conventional explanation involves a feedback loop of social complexity, tool use, language development, and dietary changes. Each advance supposedly enabled the next, creating evolutionary pressure for greater cognitive capacity. But this explanation contains circular reasoning. It describes what happened without explaining why it happened to us alone, or why it happened with such unprecedented speed. Other explanations venture into more speculative territory. Some researchers have suggested cosmic events, periods of increased radiation from space, may have accelerated mutation rates during critical periods of human evolution. Others point to climatic fluctuations, particularly in East Africa, that may have created environmental pressures favoring cognitive flexibility. As environments changed rapidly, the ability to adapt through cultural innovation rather than biological evolution became paramount. A small but persistent contingent of thinkers has even proposed extraordinary explanations involving intervention, whether by advanced ancient negatory civilizations now lost to time or even non-terrestrial intelligences. While such hypotheses remain far outside mainstream science, they highlight the explanatory vacuum at the heart of this mystery. What's not in dispute is the result: a species with cognitive capabilities that far exceed what would seem necessary for survival in our evolutionary niche. We don't merely solve problems. We create art, music, and literature that serve no obvious adaptive purpose. We contemplate the nature of reality, develop complex moral systems, and wonder about our place in the cosmos. We have even developed the capacity to reconstruct our own evolutionary history, the very subject of this exploration. If we approach this mystery with intellectual humility, we must acknowledge that something extraordinary and not fully explained happened in our evolutionary past. Something that transformed a lineage of relatively unremarkable primates into beings capable of contemplating their own origins. The stakes of this inquiry touch on our deepest questions about human nature. Are we merely clever animals, differing from other species in degree but not kind? Or did our cognitive explosion represent a genuine evolutionary discontinuity, a crossing of some threshold into a qualitatively different form of existence? Our answer shapes how we understand ourselves and our relationship to other life forms. It informs our ethical systems, our spiritual beliefs, and our vision of humanity's possible futures. If our cognitive capabilities emerged purely through conventional evolutionary mechanisms, however unlikely that may seem, then perhaps consciousness itself is more common in the universe than we imagine. Perhaps intelligence is an inevitable outcome of evolutionary processes given sufficient time. But if our emergence required some extraordinary confluence of factors, cosmic, genetic, environmental, or even intentional, then perhaps conscious intelligence like ours is vanishingly rare. Perhaps we truly are, if not unique, then at least highly unusual in the cosmic scheme. As we explore the evidence, both conventional and speculative, we'll attempt to maintain the delicate balance between scientific rigor and open-minded wonder that this mystery demands. For in this balance lies our best hope of approaching the truth. Chapter 3. Before the Dawn, the World That Shaped Our Minds. 600,000 years ago, Earth was a planet in transition. The world oscillated between ice ages and warming periods, creating environmental pressures unlike anything seen today. Massive ice sheets advanced and retreated across continents, dramatically altering landscapes, habitats, and the course of evolution itself. In Africa, where our story primarily unfolds, these global climate shifts manifested as alternating cycles of extreme aridity and relative abundance. Savannas expanded and contracted, forests retreated and advanced. Lakes dried to dust, then filled again with life-giving water. This climatic volatility created a crucible for evolution. Species that could not adapt quickly enough vanished. Those with the flexibility to survive changing conditions persisted. And among these survivors were our ancestors, not yet human, but no longer merely ape. The human evolutionary tree is not a straight line, but a complex, branching bush. By 600,000 years ago, multiple hominin species coexisted across Africa, Asia, and Europe. Homo erectus, with its larger brain and toolmaking capabilities, had already spread from Africa into much of the Old World. Neanderthals were beginning their evolutionary journey in Europe. Other species, some known only from fragmentary remains, others perhaps still awaiting discovery, occupied their own ecological niches. Each represented a different evolutionary experiment in being human. Our direct ancestors at this time were likely early members of Homo heidelbergensis, species first discovered in Germany but with fossil evidence across Africa, Europe, and possibly Asia, with brains larger than earlier hominins but not yet reaching modern human proportions. These beings walked fully upright and possessed sophisticated stone tools. They controlled fire, hunted cooperatively, and likely lived in social groups more complex than those of earlier hominins. Yet their cognitive world remained fundamentally different from our own. The archaeological record tells us they lacked symbolic expression. No cave art, no jewelry, no figurines or carvings. Whatever thoughts occupied their expanding brains, they did not feel compelled to represent them symbolically in the material world. Their technology, while impressive compared to earlier hominins, showed little variation or innovation over vast stretches of time. The same basic stone tool designs persisted with minimal change for hundreds of thousands of years, a stasis almost unimaginable from our perspective. This period, the Middle Pleistocene, represents the last major chapter before the emergence of anatomically modern humans. It was during this crucial transitional era that something remarkable began to happen inside hominin skulls. The fossil record shows a clear trend. Brain size in our lineage was increasing at an accelerated rate. While earlier hominin brains had grown gradually over millions of years, something changed around this time. The pace quickened dramatically. For context, our closest living relatives, chimpanzees and bonobos, possess brains of approximately 350 to 400 cubic centimeters. Early Homo species had brain volumes around 600 to 700 cubic centimeters. Modern humans average around 1,300 to 1,400 cubic centimeters. That threefold increase from our earliest Homo ancestors to modern humans represents an extraordinary evolutionary investment. And a significant portion of that growth occurred during the Middle Pleistocene, setting the stage for the cognitive revolution to come. But volume alone tells only part of the story. Even more significant were changes in brain organization, the development of specific regions associated with language, planning, and social cognition. Unfortunately, soft tissues don't fossilize, so we must infer these changes indirectly. One source of such inference comes from endocasts, impressions left by the brain on the inner surface of the skull. These reveal increasing complexity in the prefrontal cortex, the region most associated with advanced cognitive functions in modern humans. Another line of evidence comes from comparative studies with other primates. By analyzing which brain regions expanded most dramatically in humans compared to our closest relatives, researchers can identify the neural substrates of uniquely human capabilities. The fossil and archaeological records reveal another critical development during this period: increasing manual dexterity. Hand bones show anatomical changes that would have permitted more precise manipulation, essential for creating and using complex tools. This raises a fascinating chicken and egg question that persists in paleoanthropology. Did brain development drive manual dexterity, or did tool use drive brain development? The answer likely involves complex feedback loops between the two processes. As hands became more dexterous, they enabled more sophisticated tools. More sophisticated tools created selection pressure for greater cognitive capacity to design and use them. Greater cognitive capacity then enabled yet more complex tools, creating a virtuous cycle of coevolution. A similar feedback loop likely operated between brain development and social complexity. As groups grew larger, the cognitive demands of managing social relationships increased. Individuals who could navigate complex social hierarchies and alliances had better survival and reproductive outcomes. This social brain hypothesis suggests that our extraordinary cognitive abilities evolved, primarily to solve social problems rather than environmental ones. In essence, other humans became the most significant selective pressure shaping our brains. Diet also played a crucial role during this period. Evidence suggests that increased consumption of animal proteins, especially from large game animals, provided the caloric density necessary to fuel our energy-hungry brains. Cooking, which archaeological evidence suggests was controlled by hominins by at least 400,000 years ago, represents another revolutionary adaptation. By pre-digesting food outside the body, cooking dramatically increased the caloric yield from both plant and animal foods. This dietary revolution created a metabolic surplus that could be directed toward brain development. Without cooking, maintaining our large, energy-intensive brains would be physiologically impossible on the raw foods available to our ancestors. The Middle Pleistocene also saw changes in life history patterns, the timing of growth, development, reproduction, and death. Human children develop more slowly than other primates, with extended periods of dependency and learning. This extended childhood, while costly in terms of parental investment, allows for the acquisition of complex cultural knowledge and skills. It represents another evolutionary trade-off that ultimately favored increased cognitive capacity at the expense of more rapid development. As we reconstruct this ancient world and the beings that inhabited it, we confront the first major mystery in our exploration. What changed? Why, after millions of years of relatively modest brain expansion, did our lineage suddenly embark on a rapid trajectory of neural development? The conventional answer involves the confluence of factors we've discussed: climate volatility, social complexity, technological advancement, and dietary changes. Each contributed to an evolutionary environment that increasingly favored cognitive flexibility. But this explanation, while logical, still doesn't fully account for the unprecedented rate of change. No other lineage, despite facing similar environmental pressures, embarked on a comparable trajectory. Something unique happened in our evolutionary story. And here we encounter our first truly provocative question: was there a trigger? Some specific event or change that initiated this remarkable trajectory? Perhaps a genetic mutation that reorganized neural development, an environmental shift of particular significance, or something else entirely, something that conventional evolutionary theory struggles to accommodate. Chapter 4. The paradoxical evidence, clues from ancient skulls. The primary evidence for the human brain explosion comes from the most direct source possible: the fossilized skulls of our ancestors. These silent witnesses to our evolutionary past tell a story that is both compelling and deeply puzzling. When paleoanthropologists arrange hominin fossils in chronological order, the pattern becomes unmistakable. From approximately 2 million to 700,000 years ago, brain size in our lineage increased at a modest pace, roughly what evolutionary models would predict for. Natural selection acting on a metabolically expensive organ. But something changed around 700,000 to 600,000 years ago. The rate of expansion accelerated dramatically. By 300,000 years ago, some early Homo sapiens and Neanderthals already possessed brains within the range of modern humans. A remarkable transformation in a relatively brief evolutionary window. This acceleration defies easy explanation. Natural selection typically operates gradually, favoring small adaptive changes that accumulate over vast stretches of time. The rapid tripling of brain size in our lineage represents an extraordinary departure from this pattern. Consider the Broken Hill skull. Discovered in Zambia in 1921, dated to approximately 300,000 years ago and attributed to Homo heidelbergensis. It shows a brain capacity of around 1,280 cubic centimeters, nearly identical to modern humans. Or examine the fossils from Atapuerca, Spain, dated to roughly 430,000 years ago. These individuals, possibly early Neanderthals or their predecessors, already possessed brains approaching the size of modern humans, despite living hundreds of thousands of years before the emergence of modern Homo sapiens. What makes these findings particularly striking is the energetic cost of brain tissue. Gram for gram, the human brain consumes 10 times more energy than muscle tissue. It requires constant glucose supply and fails rapidly when deprived of oxygen or nutrients. From a purely adaptive standpoint, such an energy-intensive organ represents an enormous evolutionary gamble. The benefits must substantially outweigh the costs to be favored by natural selection. Yet the fossil record suggests our lineage doubled down on this gamble repeatedly over hundreds of thousands of years, diverting ever more metabolic resources to neural tissue despite the risks and costs involved. This investment becomes even more puzzling when we consider the archaeological evidence from this period. If brains were expanding rapidly, we might expect to see correspondingly dramatic advances in material culture, more sophisticated tools, evidence of symbolic thinking, and innovations in hunting or gathering techniques. But the archaeological record tells a different story. Stone tool technology remained remarkably static throughout much of this period. The same basic Acheulean hand axe design persisted with minimal innovation for over 1 million years, spanning much of the period of accelerated brain growth. This creates a paradox. Brains were expanding rapidly, but material culture shows little evidence of corresponding cognitive advances. It's as if our ancestors were developing neural hardware far beyond what was necessary for the software they were running. The paradox deepens when we look at evidence for symbolic thinking, the hallmark of modern human cognition. Despite brain sizes approaching modern proportions by 300,000 years ago, clear evidence of symbolic behavior, art, ornamentation, ritual burials doesn't appear consistently in the archaeological record until much later. This suggests a puzzling delay between the physical development of larger brains and the emergence of recognizably modern cognitive behaviors. Something beyond mere brain size was necessary for the flowering of human consciousness as we know it. Genetics offers another line of evidence, though one limited by the challenges of extracting and analyzing ancient DNA. Recent advances have allowed researchers to sequence genomes from Neanderthals, Denisovans, and a few specimens of early Homo sapiens. These genetic analyses reveal something remarkable. Certain genes associated with brain development show signs of positive selection during precisely the period when brain size was increasing most rapidly. Mutations in these genes appear to have swept through populations, suggesting they conferred significant adaptive advantages. One such gene, FOXP2, has been particularly studied for its role in language development. Mutations in this gene cause severe speech and language problems in modern humans. Neanderthals shared with us the same version of this gene, suggesting the neural foundations for complex language were already in place hundreds of thousands of years ago. Another gene of interest is ASPID-M, which influences brain growth. Mutations in this gene continued to be selected for in human populations until relatively recently, suggesting that whatever drove our brain expansion may have continued to operate well into the age of anatomically modern humans. Researchers have identified dozens of other genes showing evidence of positive selection related to neural development, synaptic function, and cognitive processes. The genetic evidence strongly supports the fossil record's story of rapid, sustained selection for enhanced cognitive capacity. But again, this raises the central question: what selective pressures could have been so powerful as to drive this extraordinary investment in neural tissue? What survival or reproductive advantage justified the enormous metabolic costs? One promising approach to this question comes from studying the specific regions of the brain that expanded most dramatically in humans compared to other primates. By identifying which neural systems received the greatest evolutionary investment, we might infer the selective pressures that shaped them. Comparative neuroanatomy reveals that the prefrontal cortex associated with planning, decision-making, and social cognition expanded disproportionately. So did areas involved in language processing, such as Broca's and Wernicke's areas. The parietal lobes, important for spatial representation and tool use, also saw significant expansion. This pattern suggests selection for enhanced capacities in social interaction, communication, planning, and tool use, all capabilities that would prove advantageous in an increasingly complex social environment. Another line of evidence comes from studying contemporary hunter-gatherer societies, which offer our best available model for the social structures and ecological challenges our ancestors may have faced. These studies reveal the critical importance of cultural knowledge for survival in challenging environments. Successful hunting, gathering, and navigation require accumulated wisdom passed down through generations. Individuals with enhanced cognitive capacity would be better equipped to acquire and transmit such knowledge. But a fundamental paradox remains. While these advantages are real, they don't seem sufficient to explain the extraordinary rate and extent of brain expansion in our lineage. Many other social species face similar adaptive challenges without embarking on comparable neural trajectories. This brings us to perhaps the most provocative evidence of all, the apparent uniqueness of the human path. Despite millions of species that have evolved on Earth and thousands of social species facing complex environmental challenges, only one lineage developed the capacity for abstract thought, symbolic representation, and cumulative cultural evolution that characterizes human consciousness. If the selective pressures were as straightforward as adapting to environmental change or managing social relationships, we might expect multiple independent instances of intelligence like ours evolving in different lineages. The singular nature of human cognition suggests something unusual in our evolutionary story. Some researchers have proposed that the explanation might lie in rare genetic mutations, perhaps triggered by unusual environmental luster cues. Only Ruby Kiss has the luxurious texture May will lies on colors as a lass, and leaves a rich long last in color. Some supplies long-lasting color. Some researchers have proposed that I spade some laughs, may lack some subvisit of, may some lass, may some lies, plays, deceive, may daca, may some live, may some lies, may some lie base up, by may sit, it pay me lie, I to us in the lad, I go sis it lie it go out it be ses I to it sick we sick I size by the cut see sits sick me sit sit kalia sit factors that simply never occurred in other lineages. Others suggest that our particular evolutionary history created a unique set of preconditions that enabled this neural trajectory. But more speculative explanations have also been proposed. Could cosmic factors have played a role? Earth's journey through the galaxy exposes it to varying levels of cosmic radiation, which can increase mutation rates. Might our lineage have passed through a period of enhanced mutagenesis at a critical juncture? Or might the answer lie in some form of cultural or technological bootstrapping unique to our lineage? Perhaps once early hominins crossed some threshold of cognitive capability, cultural evolution began to drive biological evolution through increasingly complex selective pressures. As we sift through these lines of evidence, fossils that show rapidly expanding brains, archaeological remains that reveal gradually developing cultures, genetic signals of strong selection on neural genes, we confront the possibility that conventional evolutionary explanations may be insufficient. Something extraordinary happened in the evolution of the human brain. Something that transformed a moderately successful primate into the dominant cognitive force on the planet. Something that set our lineage on a trajectory unlike any other in Earth's history. And here we confront the most provocative question of all. What if there are aspects of this transformation that lie beyond our current scientific frameworks? What if the emergence of human consciousness represents not just an unusual evolutionary outcome, but a fundamentally different kind of phenomenon? As we venture further into this mystery in the chapters ahead, we'll examine increasingly speculative explanations. We'll consider evidence for environmental triggers, genetic revolutions, and social innovations that might have catalyzed our cognitive explosion. We'll also confront more radical possibilities, from the impact of cosmic radiation on mutation rates to controversial theories involving directed evolution or even external intervention in our development. But first, we must grapple with an even more fundamental question that emerges from the evidence we've examined. If our brains reached essentially modern proportions hundreds of thousands of years before we began displaying modern behavioral patterns, what was happening during that long cognitive incubation? What thoughts, experiences, or capabilities might have existed in those ancient minds, minds physically similar to our own, yet operating in a world before language as we know it, before symbolic representation, before the cultural innovations that define modern humanity. The answer may lie in evidence we've not yet considered, evidence that suggests the gap between physical brain expansion and behavioral modernity might not be as wide as once believed. Evidence of cognitive capabilities far older than conventionally recognized. Evidence that will force us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the dawn of human consciousness. Chapter 5: Shadows of Contradiction, the Evidence That Doesn't Fit. The story of human cognitive evolution, as traditionally told, presents a relatively orderly narrative. Brain size increased gradually, then more rapidly. Tool technologies advanced in complexity. Social structures elaborated. Eventually, modern human consciousness emerged. But science progresses not through comfortable narratives, but through confronting anomalies, evidence that doesn't fit neatly into established frameworks. And the story of human brain evolution contains numerous such anomalies that challenge our understanding. Perhaps the most glaring contradiction lies in the timeline itself. The traditional view held that anatomically modern humans emerged around 200,000 years ago. With behaviorally modern humans, those displaying symbolic thought, complex language, and artistic expression, appearing much later. This sapience paradox, the apparent gap between anatomical and behavioral modernity, troubled researchers for decades. Why would humans with modern brain anatomy take tens of thousands of years to develop modern cognitive behaviors? Recent discoveries have upended this timeline entirely. Fossils from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, dated to approximately 315,000 years ago, display many anatomically modern features. Suddenly, the origin of our species has been pushed back by over 100,000 years. Similarly, evidence of behavioral modernity has been found at increasingly ancient sites. Ochre processing for symbolic purposes at Blombos Cave in South Africa dates to 100,000 years ago. Complex projectile technologies appear by 70,000 years ago. Shell beads used as personal ornaments date to at least 80,000 years ago. Each discovery pushes the timeline of modern human cognition further back, shrinking the supposed gap between anatomical and behavioral modernity. But this creates a new paradox. If modern human cognition emerged so early, why did technological and cultural progress remain relatively slow for tens of thousands of years? Consider the remarkable contradiction of the Neanderthals. Long portrayed as brutish, limited humans, recent evidence reveals them as sophisticated beings with complex behaviors. They buried their dead, sometimes with grave goods. They created cave art predating similar human creations. Neanderthals manufactured complex adhesives requiring multi-step processes and precise temperature control. They appear to have used medicinal plants. Genetic evidence suggests they may have shared the same FOXP2 gene variant associated with language capabilities in modern humans. Yet despite these sophisticated behaviors and brains actually larger than those of Homo sapiens, they ultimately vanished while our lineage flourished. This presents a profound puzzle. What cognitive difference, if not brain size alone, proved so evolutionarily decisive? Another contradiction emerges when we examine early human migrations. The conventional narrative once suggested that humans evolved in Africa, developing advanced cognitive capabilities before venturing into new territories approximately 60,000 years ago. But archaeological discoveries have continuously pushed back the dates of human presence outside Africa. Stone tools from Adirampakam in India date to 385,000 years ago. Human fossils from Mislia Cave in Israel reach 200,000 years. Homo sapiens remains in Greece date to 210,000 years ago. These findings suggest multiple waves of human migration out of Africa, beginning much earlier than previously thought. This raises profound questions. Did these early migrants possess the same cognitive capabilities as later humans? If not, what changed in human cognition between these waves? The archaeological record contains other anomalies that defy easy explanation. Consider the case of Homo floresiensis, the hobbit species discovered on the Indonesian island of Flores. These diminutive hominins stood just over 3 feet tall, with brain sizes comparable to chimpanzees. Yet they manufactured sophisticated stone tools and apparently hunted cooperatively. Behaviors typically associated with much larger brain species. Their existence challenges the assumption that advanced cognition necessarily requires large brain volume. Similarly puzzling is the case of the Denisovans, another human species known primarily from DNA extracted from a single finger bone and a few teeth found in Siberia. Genetic analysis suggests they possessed unique adaptations for high-altitude living that were later acquired by modern Tibetans through interbreeding. How did a species known from such scant physical remains develop such sophisticated physiological adaptations? What level of cognition did they possess? The questions multiply, while answers remain elusive. Perhaps the most profound contradiction in human cognitive evolution concerns language, the hallmark of modern human thought. Language leaves no direct archaeological traces, yet it represents the most transformative cognitive adaptation in our evolutionary history. When did language as we understand it emerge? The evidence is conflicting. Some researchers point to anatomical features like the hypoglossal canal, which carries nerves to the tongue, suggesting speech capabilities in Homo heidelbergensis as early as 600,000 years ago. Others examine the hyoid bone, which anchors the tongue muscles. Neanderthal hyoid bones appear identical to those of modern humans, suggesting similar speech capabilities. Yet others argue that true language required neural reorganization invisible in the fossil record, potentially emerging much later. This uncertainty about language origins represents perhaps the greatest anomaly in understanding human cognitive evolution. Without knowing when and how language emerged, can we truly claim to understand the explosion of the human mind? The genetic evidence presents its own contradictions. Certain genes associated with brain development show strong signals of positive selection during human evolution, suggesting they played crucial roles in our cognitive emergence. Yet when researchers have inserted some of these human-specific genes into mice, the results have been surprising. Some, like FOXP2, produce modest effects on neural development and vocalization. Others produce more dramatic impacts on brain size and organization. But none has created the kind of transformative cognitive change we might expect from genes that supposedly drove human brain evolution. This suggests our cognitive emergence likely involved complex interactions between multiple genes and environmental factors that we're only beginning to understand. Perhaps the most perplexing anomaly involves the archaeological record of technological development. If brain size reached essentially modern proportions by 300,000 years ago, why did technological innovation proceed so slowly for hundreds of thousands of years? The Acheulean hand axe remained virtually unchanged for over 1 million years, an astonishing period of technological stasis. Then, around 300,000 years ago, more sophisticated prepared core techniques emerged. But another long period of minimal innovation followed. Only within the past 100,000 years do we see evidence of rapidly accelerating technological change, the hallmark of modern human innovation. What accounts for this delayed expression of cognitive potential? Were earlier humans cognitively different despite similar brain sizes? Or might the explanation lie in demographic factors? Some researchers suggest that innovation requires connected populations of sufficient size to maintain and build upon discoveries. Perhaps early humans, living in small, isolated groups, simply lacked the population density necessary for cumulative cultural evolution. Another contradiction concerns the relationship between brain size and intelligence. While human brains tripled in size during our evolution, they have actually decreased in volume by approximately 10% over the past 20,000 years, precisely during the period of our greatest cultural and technological achievements. This suggests that raw brain volume alone cannot explain cognitive capabilities. Neural organization, connectivity patterns, and metabolic efficiency may matter more than sheer size, forcing us to reconsider simplistic narratives about brain expansion and intelligence. The geographic pattern of human cognitive evolution presents another anomaly. The conventional narrative long placed all significant developments in human evolution in Africa, with innovations spreading outward from this center of origin. But recent discoveries suggest a more complex picture. Sophisticated cave art in Spain dates to at least 65,000 years ago, predating similar art in Africa, and apparently created by Neanderthals. Complex projectile technologies appear in South Africa and Australia at roughly the same time. This pattern suggests either multiple independent inventions of similar technologies or much earlier common origins than previously recognized. Either possibility challenges straightforward narratives of human cognitive development. As we confront these anomalies and contradictions, a more complex picture emerges. Human cognitive evolution appears less like a steady march of progress and more like a mosaic of developments. Some gradual while others surprisingly rapid, playing out across different populations and regions. The traditional timeline collapses under new evidence. The boundaries between human species blur as we discover extensive interbreeding. The relationship between brain anatomy and cognitive capability becomes increasingly nuanced and complex. In this more intricate landscape of human origins, simple narratives fail. We must embrace a more profound mystery, one that acknowledges the possibility that conventional evolutionary mechanisms alone may be insufficient to fully explain the emergence of the human mind. This brings us to, perhaps, the most provocative anomaly of all, the apparently singular nature of human cognition. Despite millions of species evolving on Earth over billions of years, only one, our own, developed the capacity for abstract thought, symbolic representation, and cumulative culture that defines human consciousness. Chapter 6. Whispers across time, ancient knowledge, and unexplained patterns throughout human history. Cultures across the globe have preserved myths and legends about the origins of human consciousness. While modern science typically dismisses such stories as mere cultural inventions, might they contain fragments of genuinely remembered history or encoded truths about our cognitive emergence? Consider the remarkable consistency of certain mythic themes. Cultures separated by vast distances and time periods share strikingly similar stories about the sudden acquisition of knowledge or consciousness, often through some form of divine intervention or interaction with advanced beings. In Mesopotamian tradition, the god Enki gives wisdom and civilization to humanity. In Greek myth, Prometheus steals fire from the gods to elevate human capability. Genesis describes the tree of knowledge bestowing awareness. Sumerian texts speak of the Anunnaki creating humans through genetic manipulation. These narratives share a common theme: human consciousness as something granted or triggered rather than gradually evolved. While such stories were once dismissed entirely, some anthropologists now suggest they might preserve cultural memories of significant cognitive transitions experienced by our ancestors. The Dreamtime stories of Aboriginal Australians, maintained through oral tradition for tens of thousands of years, describe the creation of landscape features that were submerged by rising sea levels after the last ice age. Events now confirmed by geology, but impossible for these cultures to know directly. If oral traditions can preserve accurate knowledge across such vast time frames, might they also contain insights about the emergence of human consciousness? Could myths about gods actually describe encounters with cognitively advanced populations that triggered cultural or genetic exchanges? This speculative territory requires careful navigation. We must avoid both uncritical acceptance of myth as literal truth and dismissive rejection of traditional knowledge that might contain genuine historical insights preserved across generations. The concept of out-of-place evidence offers another window into potentially overlooked aspects of human cognitive evolution. These are archaeological findings that appear anomalous, seemingly too. sophisticated for their time period or location. Consider the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a 2,100-year-old shipwreck. This ancient Greek device could track astronomical positions with remarkable precision through a complex system of at least 30 intermeshed bronze gears, technology not seen again until the development of medieval mechanical clocks. Or examine the Baghdad battery, a 2,000-year-old clay jar containing a copper cylinder and iron rod that, when filled with an acidic liquid, produces an electric current. While its purpose remains debated, it demonstrates electrochemical knowledge long before the formal discovery of electricity. These examples come from historical periods, but similar anomalies appear in prehistory. The megalithic structures of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to approximately 11,600 years ago, were created by hunter-gatherers who had not yet developed agriculture, pottery, or metal tools. Yet these massive stone pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, feature sophisticated carvings and required complex social organization to construct. How did a pre-agricultural society develop the organizational capacity and motivation to create such monuments? Similar questions surround other ancient sites. How did megalith builders achieve such precise astronomical alignments without written mathematics? How did ancient engineers move massive stone blocks with such precision using only primitive tools? These questions don't necessarily require speculative answers involving lost, advanced civilizations or extraterrestrial intervention. They may simply indicate that conventional narratives underestimate the cognitive capabilities of our ancestors. Recent research increasingly suggests that traditional hunter-gatherer societies possessed sophisticated astronomical, mathematical, and engineering knowledge, challenging the notion that such capabilities emerged only with agriculture and urbanization. The Australian Wurdi Yang stone arrangement, created by Aboriginal peoples thousands of years ago, accurately marks the positions of the setting sun at the solstices and equinoxes. Similar astronomical knowledge appears in stone circles and alignments worldwide. Indigenous navigation techniques in Polynesia enabled precise oceanic voyaging without instruments through sophisticated observation of stars, currents, and other natural phenomena. These represent complex cognitive achievements preserved through oral rather than written tradition. This recognition of sophisticated pre-literate knowledge systems forces us to reconsider assumptions about cognitive capabilities in prehistory. The absence of writing doesn't indicate absence of complex thought, merely different methods of knowledge preservation. Genetic evidence offers another source of potentially out-of-place information about human cognitive evolution. Studies of ancient Homo have revealed unexpected patterns of interbreeding between human species, with profound implications for understanding our cognitive heritage. Modern humans outside Africa carry approximately 2%. Neanderthal DNA. Some Asian and oceanic populations have up to 6%. Denisovan DNA. Evidence suggests additional interbreeding with other archaic human populations, not yet identified through fossil remains. This genetic exchange wasn't merely incidental. In several cases, specific genes acquired through interbreeding appear to have been strongly selected for suggesting they provided significant adaptive advantages. These include genes related to immune function, high-altitude adaptation, and potentially brain development. Could cognitive capabilities have been shared between human species through genetic exchange? Might interbreeding have accelerated neural evolution in ways that purely gradual processes could not? The possibility remains largely unexplored, but potentially significant. Another pattern challenging conventional narratives involves the geographic distribution of early evidence for symbolic thinking. Traditional models suggested symbolic thought emerged in Europe with the cave paintings of France and Spain, dating to approximately 40,000 years ago. But discoveries at Blombos Cave in South Africa push this timeline back to at least 100,000 years ago, with engraved ochre pieces and shell beads suggesting abstract symbolic thought. Similarly, ancient evidence has emerged from sites across Africa and Asia. This, pattern suggests symbolic thinking may have emerged multiple times independently or much earlier than previously recognized. Either possibility complicates straightforward narratives about the emergence of human consciousness. Some researchers propose a more radical possibility: that the capacity for symbolic thought may have existed in the human lineage long before it's consistent. Archaeological expression. Perhaps the cognitive hardware for modern consciousness was present hundreds of thousands of years before circumstances allowed or required its full expression. This latent capacity hypothesis might explain why brain size reached modern proportions long before clear evidence of modern behaviors. The neural machinery existed, but environmental, demographic, or cultural conditions hadn't yet triggered its full manifestation. The archaeological record contains tantalizing hints supporting this possibility. Isolated instances of seemingly symbolic behavior appear long before their systematic expression. A zigzag engraving on a shell from Java, created by Homo erectus approximately 500,000 years ago, represents the oldest known geometric pattern made by any human species. Similarly, red ochre pigment, often associated with symbolic activities, appears at sites dating to 300,000 years or more. While its use may have been functional rather than symbolic, it suggests experimentation with materials later central to symbolic expression. Among the most provocative patterns in human cognitive evolution is the apparent creative explosion that occurred approximately 50,000 to 40,000 years ago in Europe and at various earlier times in Africa and Asia. During these periods, archaeological evidence shows sudden proliferations of art, ornamentation, and technological innovation. The timing of these creative bursts doesn't correspond with any known increase in brain size or structural change. What triggered these apparent cognitive leaps? Some researchers suggest climatic stress may have forced innovation. Others propose demographic factors reaching critical thresholds for cultural accumulation. More speculative explanations include genetic mutations affecting neural function or even cosmic factors like changes in Earth's magnetic field or radiation levels that might have influenced cognition or perception. Perhaps the most controversial pattern involves cases of apparently advanced knowledge in ancient cultures. Mathematical, astronomical, or engineering insights seemingly beyond their technological level. The astronomical precision of ancient monuments from Stonehenge to the pyramids of Giza has fueled speculation about lost knowledge systems. The Piri race map, created in 1513 but compiled from much older sources, appears to show features of Antarctica not discovered until modern times. The mathematics embedded in ancient Vedic texts includes concepts rediscovered by modern physics. The medicinal plants used by indigenous shamans often contain pharmacologically active compounds identified by modern science. While fringe theories attribute such knowledge to extraterrestrial contact or lost advanced civilizations, more measured explanations recognize that pre-scientific cultures could develop sophisticated understanding through centuries of careful observation and experimentation. Nevertheless, these patterns remind us that knowledge can be lost as well as gained. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria, the burning of Maya codices by Spanish conquistadors, and countless other instances of cultural devastation have erased vast stores of ancient knowledge. Might similar losses have occurred in prehistory? Could climate catastrophes, population bottlenecks, or migrations have severed links to earlier knowledge traditions? The archaeological record, by its nature fragmentary and incomplete, may preserve only glimpses of our ancestors' full cognitive world. As we navigate these patterns and anomalies, we must maintain scientific skepticism while remaining open to possibilities beyond current paradigms. The emergence of the human mind represents such an extraordinary evolutionary development that conventional explanations may indeed prove insufficient. Chapter 7. Beyond Imagination, the Implications of Our Mysterious Origins. As we venture deeper into the mystery of human cognitive evolution, the stakes of our inquiry have grown increasingly profound. What began as a scientific puzzle about brain expansion has revealed itself as something far more significant: a fundamental question about the nature of consciousness itself and humanity's place in the cosmos. If conventional evolutionary mechanisms cannot fully explain the emergence of human consciousness, what are the alternatives? And what would each possibility mean for our understanding of ourselves and our future? Let us consider the implications of several scenarios, ranging from the scientifically orthodox to the genuinely revolutionary. Each offers a different vision of human nature and potential, each with profound consequences for how we might view our origins and destiny. The first possibility is that conventional natural selection, operating through known mechanisms, is indeed sufficient to explain human cognitive emergence. Perhaps the apparent anomalies and accelerated timeline of brain expansion reflect incomplete understanding rather than genuinely inexplicable phenomena. In this scenario, human consciousness represents an extraordinary but not metaphysically special outcome of standard evolutionary processes. Our cognitive capabilities emerge through the gradual accumulation of adaptations selected for their survival and reproductive advantages in our ancestral environments. The implications would be significant but not revolutionary. Human consciousness would represent a remarkable but natural phenomenon, potentially replicable elsewhere in the universe given similar evolutionary conditions. Our cognitive future would likely involve continued biological and cultural evolution, along broadly predictable trajectories. But what if conventional evolution proves insufficient? What if the human mind represents something that cannot be fully explained through traditional Darwinian mechanisms? This possibility opens several alternative scenarios with increasingly radical implications. The second possibility involves emergent properties, phenomena that arise from complex systems in ways not predictable from their components. Perhaps at some critical threshold of neural complexity, consciousness, as we experience it, spontaneously emerged as a fundamentally new phenomenon in the universe. This scenario doesn't require supernatural intervention or violation of natural laws, but it suggests consciousness represents something qualitatively different from other biological adaptations, a genuine evolutionary discontinuity rather than merely an elaborate elaboration of simpler cognitive processes. If true, this would suggest potentially profound limits to artificial intelligence. If consciousness emerges only from specific biological substrates or organizational patterns, our attempts to create conscious machines might be fundamentally misguided, like trying to extract music from painting supplies. A third possibility involves cosmic factors not typically considered in evolutionary biology. Earth's journey through the galaxy exposes it to varying levels of radiation, electromagnetic influences, and other cosmic phenomena. Might these have influenced human evolution in ways we've barely begun to consider? Some researchers have noted correlations between periods of human cognitive advancement and changes in Earth's magnetic field or exposure to cosmic radiation. While correlation doesn't prove causation, these patterns raise intriguing questions about potential triggers for genetic or epigenetic changes affecting neural development. This scenario would suggest human consciousness might be less unique than it appears, perhaps part of larger cosmic patterns of complexity emergence. It might also imply potential future cognitive transformations triggered by similar cosmic influences. A fourth possibility involves directed panspermia, the hypothesis that life on Earth was deliberately seeded by an advanced extraterrestrial civilization. First seriously proposed by Nobel laureate Francis Crick and chemist Leslie Orgall. This concept has variants suggesting not just life, but specific genetic sequences might have been intentionally introduced. Might key genetic innovations that enabled human cognitive evolution have extraterrestrial origins? The implications would be revolutionary, suggesting human consciousness represents not just an evolutionary, a CCID-ENT, but part of a larger pattern of intelligence propagation throughout the cosmos. This scenario would fundamentally transform our understanding of human nature and potential. We would be part of a much larger story of cosmic intelligence, perhaps with responsibilities to continue this process by eventually seeding life and intelligence elsewhere. A fifth possibility, Perhaps the most radical involves direct intervention by advanced intelligence in human cognitive evolution. This concept, popularized but generally dismissed as ancient astronaut theory, proposes that contact with non-human intelligence catalyzed or directed human cognitive development. While mainstream science rightfully rejects claims based on misinterpreted archaeological evidence or uncritical readings of mythology, the core question remains: can we definitively rule out any form of intervention in human cognitive evolution? If such intervention occurred, its nature remains entirely speculative. It could range from subtle genetic modifications to cultural knowledge transfers, potentially by extraterrestrial visitors, time travelers from our own future, or even non-physical consciousnesses existing in ways we cannot yet comprehend. The implications would be shattering for our current worldview. Human history, religion, philosophy, and science would require fundamental re-examination. Our cosmic significance and potential responsibilities would be dramatically reframed. Between these scenarios lie numerous hybrid possibilities. Perhaps conventional evolution explains most of our cognitive emergence, with cosmic factors occasionally accelerating genetic changes. Or perhaps emergent properties of neural complexity created conditions where subtle interventions could have outsized effects. The honest assessment remains that we simply don't know. The emergence of human consciousness represents such an extraordinary development in Earth's history and appears so disproportionate to conventional, adaptive pressures that multiple explanations remain scientifically viable. This uncertainty itself carries profound implications. It suggests genuine humility about our origins and nature may be more appropriate than the confident narratives often presented in scientific or religious contexts. It also suggests our future cognitive evolution might follow pathways we cannot currently predict or even imagine. If our origins contain mysteries beyond current scientific frameworks, our potential futures likely harbor equally profound possibilities. Consider the accelerating interface between human cognition and technology. Brain-computer interfaces, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and nanotechnology are rapidly creating possibilities for extending or transforming human cognitive capabilities. If our cognitive emergence followed conventional evolutionary patterns, these technologies represent merely the next logical step in our development-conscious direction of previously unconscious processes. But if our origins involve more exotic factors, emergent properties, cosmic influences, or forms of intervention, these technologies might be opening doorways with consequences we cannot fully anticipate. We may be approaching thresholds similar to those our ancestors crossed hundreds of thousands of years ago. The question of human cognitive uniqueness carries equally significant implications. If we are merely the product of ordinary evolutionary processes acting on one primate lineage, then similar intelligence has likely evolved elsewhere in the cosmos. We would be one among potentially countless conscious species. But if our emergence required truly extraordinary circumstances, rare cosmic conditions, improbable genetic sequences, or even forms of intervention, then consciousness like ours might be vanishingly rare in the universe. We might bear singular responsibility for preserving and extending conscious experience in our cosmic neighborhood. This possibility carries enormous ethical weight. If advanced consciousness is cosmically common, our mistakes and limitations have primarily local consequences. But if we represent something genuinely rare or unique, our choices about technology, space exploration, and long-term survival carry implications beyond our planet or species. The mystery of our origins also raises profound philosophical questions about consciousness itself. Is awareness, as we experience it, an inevitable outcome of sufficient neural complexity? Or does it represent something fundamental to reality that found expression through biological evolution? Some scientific models propose consciousness as an emergent property of information processing. It's potentially reproducible in non-biological systems, given sufficient complexity. Others suggest it may involve quantum processes that connect mind more fundamentally to the fabric of reality itself. The difference matters enormously. If consciousness is merely an emergent property of neural complexity, then artificial intelligence may eventually replicate or supersede human awareness. Our unique perspective would represent a transitional stage rather than an endpoint. But if consciousness involves aspects of reality not reducible to conventional physical processes, then human awareness might represent something that cannot be fully replicated artificially, a genuine cosmic development rather than merely a complex arrangement of ordinary matter. As we approach the climax of our exploration, the central mystery deepens rather than resolves. The human mind, this extraordinary capacity that allows us to contemplate our own origins and ponder the nature of compes, and mature the nature of com. As we approach the climax of compiets, as we approach the climax of our copiessence with commies of comiest, the separative receive, these calmiact resolve, made so complete by you, my severed to complete. Their severite to us, my asef, my sevities, propade with us. By sobriety, I cannot to make. We allied it sly, we say ka bekis it. Lie sate skik kizide I lead. Sits kidisit the light to take use etiko the test get to kick to beats. Greed it does, listens to deep reality itself appears increasingly enigmatic the more closely we examine it. Its emergence through evolution seems simultaneously inevitable in retrospect, yet profoundly improbable when we consider the precise sequence of events required. Its relationship to the physical brain remains incompletely understood despite centuries of scientific inquiry. And most mysterious of all, the subjective experience of being conscious, what philosophers call qualia, continues to resist full scientific explanation. We cannot yet bridge the explanatory gap between neural activity and the felt experience of awareness. This persistent mystery at the heart of human existence suggests something profound about our nature and cosmic significance. Whether consciousness emerged through conventional evolution, cosmic influence, emergent complexity, or something more exotic, its existence represents one of the universe's most extraordinary developments. Through human consciousness, the cosmos has developed the capacity to contemplate itself, to study its own origins, structure, and potential futures. Matter arranged in sufficiently complex patterns has somehow generated awareness, wonder, and the quest for meaning. Through human consciousness, the cosmos has developed the capacity to contemplate itself, to study its own origins, structure, and potential futures. Matter arranged in sufficiently complex patterns has somehow generated awareness, wonder, and the quest for meaning. As we stand at this unique moment in history with unprecedented understanding of our evolutionary past and unprecedented power to shape our immediate future, the mystery of our origins takes on urgent significance. If we cannot fully explain how we became what we are, can we confidently direct what we might become? The emergence of human consciousness involved factors beyond conventional understanding. Might similar factors influence our ongoing cognitive evolution? And perhaps most provocatively, what if the next chapter in the story of consciousness on Earth involves another transformation as profound as the one that first gave rise to the human mind? What if we stand on the threshold of a cognitive leap as significant as the one our ancestors experienced 600,000 years ago, a transformation that would make our current awareness seem as limited in retrospect as we now view the minds of our pre-human ancestors? The evidence we've examined suggests such possibilities cannot be dismissed as mere speculation. Something genuinely extraordinary happened in human cognitive evolution, something that conventional frameworks struggle to fully explain. And if it happened once, it could happen again. The mystery of our origins may contain the key to our destiny if we have the wisdom and courage to embrace the full implications of what we've discovered. But to understand these implications fully, we must confront the most challenging evidence of all, findings that push beyond the boundaries of established science into territory where conventional explanations begin to fail entirely. Chapter 8. the contenders' three theories that could explain everything. As we approach the culmination of our exploration into the mysterious explosion of the human brain, it's time to examine the leading theories that might explain this extraordinary evolutionary event. Each offers a different lens through which to view our cognitive emergence, and each carries profoundly different implications. Three theories stand out for their explanatory power and evidence base. Each addresses the central paradox we've been circling. How did human brains triple in size and reorganize so rapidly, defying conventional evolutionary timescales? The first and most scientifically orthodox is what researchers call the social brain hypothesis. This theory proposes that the primary selective, pressure-driving human brain evolution was social complexity itself. As early hominin groups grew larger, the cognitive demands of navigating complex social relationships increased exponentially. Those who could track relationships, form alliances, detect deception, and coordinate group activities had significant advantages in survival and reproduction. This created a powerful feedback loop. Increased social intelligence led to larger, more complex groups, which in turn created selection pressure for even greater social intelligence. With each iteration, brains grew larger and neural circuits specialized for social cognition became more sophisticated. Evidence supporting this theory comes from comparing brain size across primate species. Those living in larger, more complex social groups tend to have proportionally larger brains. The correlation is striking and has been replicated in multiple studies. Further evidence comes from examining which brain regions expanded most dramatically during human evolution. The prefrontal cortex, associated with social cognition, planning, and impulse control, grew disproportionately compared to other regions. Neuroimaging studies show these areas activate intensely during social interactions, suggesting they evolved specifically to handle the computational demands of complex social dynamics. This specialization may have been the primary driver of our cognitive explosion. The timeline fits as well. The period of most rapid brain expansion coincides with evidence for increasingly complex social structures in our ancestral lineage, including cooperative hunting, childcare sharing, and division of labor. This theory has the advantage of working within established evolutionary frameworks. It doesn't require exotic triggers or interventions, just the gradual intensification of selection pressures that were always present in primate evolution. But it faces significant challenges. While social complexity might explain gradual brain expansion, it struggles to account for the remarkable speed of human neural evolution. Other highly social species haven't experienced comparable cognitive explosions despite similar selective pressures. The second major theory takes a different approach, focusing on environmental and climatic factors. The environmental variability hypothesis proposes that the key driver wasn't social complexity, but environmental instability, particularly during the Pleistocene epoch. This period witnessed dramatic climate fluctuations, rapid shifts between glacial and interglacial conditions that transformed landscapes within single lifetimes. Species adapted to stable environments often went extinct during these transitions. Those capable of behavioral flexibility survived. Human ancestors faced these volatile conditions in African environments that were especially sensitive to climate shifts. Savannas expanded and contracted. Lakes formed and dried up. Food resources appeared and disappeared with unprecedented rapidity. In this chaotic environment, cognitive flexibility became the ultimate adaptation. Individuals capable of innovating new subsistence strategies, remembering solutions to previous environmental challenges, and teaching these skills to offspring had dramatic survival advantages. The evidence for this theory comes from paleoecological reconstructions showing that periods of greatest climatic variability coincide with periods of most rapid brain expansion in our lineage. The timing is remarkably consistent. Comparative studies provide further support. Species evolving in more variable environments tend to develop larger brains and greater experiential flexibility than closely related species in more stable environments. The pattern holds across mammals and birds. This theory elegantly explains certain aspects of human cognition that the social brain hypothesis struggles with, particularly our extraordinary capacity for innovation and adaptation to novel environments. It explains why humans, unlike any other species, have colonized virtually every ecosystem on Earth. But it too faces challenges. While environmental variability might select for increased behavioral flexibility, the specific neural adaptations that emerged in humans' language, abstract thinking, symbolic representation, seem to go far beyond what would be strictly necessary for ecological adaptation. The third theory ventures into more controversial territory. The genetic saltation hypothesis suggests that conventional gradual evolution alone cannot explain the human cognitive explosion. Instead, it proposes that rare genetic events, major mutations, gene flow between populations, or even viral DNA insertions triggered revolutionary neural changes. Saltation refers to evolutionary jumps rather than gradual transitions. While mainstream evolutionary biology has traditionally been skeptical of saltationist explanations, growing evidence suggests major genetic reorganizations sometimes do occur and can drive rapid evolutionary change. The human genome contains evidence of numerous such events. Endogenous retroviruses, ancient viral DNA incorporated into our genome, make up approximately 8% of human genetic material. Some of these insertions appear to have influenced brain development genes. Research has identified several genes involved in human brain development that show evidence of positive selection during precisely the period of most rapid brain expansion. These include genes regulating neural growth, synaptic development, and energy metabolism in brain tissue. One particularly intriguing example is the NOTCH2NL gene family, which appears to have emerged through genetic duplication events approximately 3 to 4 million years ago, just before the period of most rapid brain expansion in our lineage. These genes regulate the proliferation of neural stem cells during brain development. When inserted into mouse embryos, they cause increased production of cortical neurons, suggesting they may have played a key role in human brain expansion. Another candidate is RJAP11B, a gene that emerged approximately 5 million years ago through partial duplication. It promotes neural stem cell production and is expressed specifically in areas that expanded dramatically during human evolution. The genetic saltation hypothesis suggests that such mutations, perhaps occurring in rapid succession or interacting synergistically, could have triggered cognitive changes far more rapidly than conventional evolution would predict. This theory has the advantage of potentially explaining both the speed and the uniqueness of human cognitive evolution. If our neural explosion required rare genetic events rather than just gradual adaptation, this would explain why similar intelligence hasn't evolved repeatedly. But it faces significant challenges as well. Critics point out that even major mutations must still be integrated into existing developmental systems. The effects would likely be fatal or severely disruptive rather than adaptive without gradual refinement through natural selection. Additionally, if single genes or small gene networks could trigger such dramatic cognitive changes, we might expect more examples of rapid intelligence evolution among other species. The apparent uniqueness of human cognition suggests more complex explanations. As we weigh these competing theories, it becomes apparent that each captures important aspects of human cognitive evolution while missing others. The full explanation likely involves elements of all three, a complex interplay of social, environmental, and genetic factors. The social brain hypothesis correctly identifies the crucial importance of social complexity in shaping human cognition. The environmental variability hypothesis highlights the powerful selective pressures created by rapidly changing environments. And the genetic saltation hypothesis points to molecular mechanisms that could have accelerated evolutionary change. But the mystery remains. Why us? Why only our lineage? What unique combination of factors converged to create the only species on Earth capable of contemplating its own origins? To answer this question, we must turn to the latest scientific discoveries, findings that are rewriting our understanding of human cognitive evolution. Chapter 9. Breaking Boundaries, the science that changes everything. Recent scientific breakthroughs are transforming our understanding of human brain evolution in ways that were unimaginable even a decade ago. New techniques for analyzing ancient DNA, advanced neuroimaging, computational modeling, and archaeological dating methods have opened windows into our evolutionary past that were previously sealed. What these discoveries reveal is both exhilarating and humbling. The story of human cognitive emergence is far more complex, more mysterious, and potentially more profound than conventional narratives have suggested. Perhaps the most revolutionary advances come from the field of paleogenetics, the study of ancient DNA. Until recently, our understanding of hominin evolution relied almost exclusively on fossil morphology, the shapes and sizes of ancient bones and teeth. But now, researchers can extract and sequence DNA from fossils hundreds of thousands of years old. This genetic time capsule reveals details about our ancestors and their relatives that no physical examination could ever discern. One of the most startling discoveries is the extent of interbreeding between ancient human populations. The genomes of non-African humans contain approximately 2% Neanderthal DNA. Some Asian populations carry up to 6% Denisovan DNA. Evidence suggests additional interbreeding with other archaic human populations not yet identified. This genetic exchange wasn't merely incidental. Analysis shows that certain archaic genes were strongly selected for after integration, meaning they provided significant adaptive advantages. These include genes related to immune function, skin pigmentation, adaptation to high altitudes, and potentially brain development. Recent research has identified several neural genes acquired through interbreeding that show evidence of positive selection. These include NOVA1, which regulates brain development and function. It may have influenced synaptic development in modern humans after acquisition from Neanderthals. This paints a radically different picture of human cognitive evolution than the traditional linear progression. Rather than a single species gradually developing larger brains, we now see a complex network of interbreeding populations, exchanging genetic innovations, a kind of distributed evolutionary intelligence. The implications are profound. Our cognitive explosion may have resulted not from gradual mutation within a single lineage, but from the novel combinations of neural adaptations that emerged when previously separate populations interbred. A form of hybrid vigor at the level of cognitive capacity. Advances in neuroimaging and computational modeling have yielded equally revolutionary insights. Researchers can now create detailed simulations of how brains of different sizes and organizations would function, allowing us to resurrect the cognitive capabilities of our extinct ancestors. These models suggest something surprising. The difference between modern human cognition and that of our immediate ancestors may be less about hardware and more about software. The neural architecture was largely in place long before the full flowering of modern human behavior. This creates a profound paradox. If the cognitive hardware for modern human thinking existed hundreds of thousands of years before evidence of modern behavior, what triggered the eventual expression of these capabilities? Some researchers propose a cultural triggering hypothesis. According to this view, the potential for modern human cognition existed in our species for hundreds of thousands of years before cultural innovations. Particularly language and symbolic systems created the conditions for its full expression. This would explain the apparent delay between anatomical and behavioral modernity. The brain's capabilities existed in latent form, awaiting the cultural innovations that would allow their manifestation. If true, this suggests something remarkable about human cognition. It may be fundamentally interdependent with culture in ways that make it qualitatively different from other forms of animal intelligence. Not merely an individual property, but a distributed phenomenon that emerges through social interaction. Archaeological discoveries have added further complexity to the picture. Evidence for symbolic thinking, once thought to emerge suddenly around 50,000 to 40,000 years ago, has been pushed back repeatedly by new findings. Ochre processing at Blombos Cave in South Africa dates to 100,000 years ago. Engraved shells from Indonesia reach 430,000 years. Geometric patterns on ostrich eggshells in South Africa extend to 60,000 years. Each discovery extends the timeline of symbolic thought further into the past. The pattern suggests not a sudden cognitive revolution, but a gradual, punctuated emergence of modern behaviors across different populations and regions. The capacity may have existed long before its consistent archaeological expression. This creates another paradox. If the capacity for symbolic thought existed so early, why did technological innovation remain relatively slow for tens of thousands of years before accelerating dramatically in the recent past? One compelling explanation involves demographic factors. Models suggest that innovation requires connected populations of sufficient size to maintain and build upon cultural knowledge. Below certain population thresholds, innovations tend to be lost faster than they accumulate. Recent genetic and archaeological evidence indicates human populations remained relatively small and isolated for most of our species. History, with significant population growth and interconnection occurring only in the past 10,000 to 15,000 years. This demographic shift may explain the recent acceleration of cultural and technological innovation better than any change in cognitive capacity. Our brains didn't suddenly improve. Our collective ability to preserve and build upon knowledge reached a critical threshold. Perhaps the most revolutionary finding comes from the field of epigenetics, the study of how environmental factors influence gene expression without changing DNA sequences themselves. This emerging science suggests our genomes contain far more plasticity than previously recognized. Research shows that environmental factors from nutrition to stress to environmental toxins can trigger changes in gene expression that can be passed to subsequent generations. These epigenetic changes can influence neural development and cognitive function. The implications for understanding human cognitive evolution are profound. Perhaps our ancestors' brains responded to environmental challenges not just through natural selection of genetic mutations, a slow process, but through epigenetic adaptations that could emerge within a single generation. This would create a form of Lamarckian inheritance, the transmission of acquired characteristics. Operating alongside traditional Darwinian selection could potentially explain the apparent rapidity of human cognitive evolution without requiring dramatic genetic changes. It might also explain why similar cognitive capabilities appear to have emerged independently in separated human populations, rather than requiring the same rare mutations. Similar environmental pressures might have triggered comparable epigenetic responses across different groups. The most speculative but potentially revolutionary research involves the emerging field of quantum biology, the study of quantum mechanical phenomena in biological systems. Some researchers propose that quantum effects may play important roles in consciousness and cognition, while mainstream neuroscience maintains that neural activity is adequately explained by classical physics. A growing minority argues that quantum phenomena, including superposition, entanglement, and tunneling, may be essential to understanding consciousness. If true, this would suggest something extraordinary about human cognitive evolution. Perhaps the rapid expansion and reorganization of our ancestors' brains enabled the emergence of quantum-mediated consciousness, a fundamentally different kind of awareness than exists in simpler nervous systems. This hypothesis remains highly speculative, but it highlights the possibility that human consciousness may represent something qualitatively different from other forms of animal cognition, not merely more complex processing, but a different kind of phenomenon entirely. As we integrate these revolutionary scientific advances, a new understanding of human cognitive evolution begins to emerge, one far more complex and potentially more profound than traditional narratives. Our brains appear to have evolved not through a single process, but through multiple interacting mechanisms. Natural selection within populations, genetic exchange between populations, epigenetic responses to environmental pressures, and cultural innovations creating new selective landscapes. The result was not just a larger brain, but a fundamentally different kind of mind, one capable of forms of awareness. thought, and cultural creation unprecedented in Earth's history. But the most profound implication of these scientific advances is the recognition that human consciousness may represent something more extraordinary than we have previously acknowledged, not merely an elaboration of animal cognition, but perhaps a genuine discontinuity in the evolution of awareness in the cosmos. Chapter 10. The Transcendent Pattern. What it all means. We've journeyed through the labyrinth of human cognitive evolution, examining fossil evidence, genetic clues, archaeological findings, and competing theories. Now we arrive at the central revelation this exploration has been building toward, the pattern that emerges when all these pieces are assembled. The human brain's explosive development represents something more profound than just another evolutionary adaptation. It appears to be a genuine phase transition in the evolution of consciousness, on Earth comparable in significance to the emergence of life itself from non-living chemistry. This perspective doesn't require supernatural explanation or intervention. It simply recognizes that certain developments in cosmic evolution represent fundamental transitions rather than mere elaborations of existing patterns. Just as life represented a new organizational principle emerging from complex chemistry, human consciousness appears to represent a new kind of awareness emerging from the complex neural architecture our evolution produced. The evidence we've examined supports this interpretation. The rapid tripling of brain size in our lineage defies conventional evolutionary timescales. The emergence of symbolic thought, language, and cumulative culture has no parallel in any other species. Most tellingly, only human brains have developed the capacity for recursive self-awareness, consciousness contemplating consciousness itself. This ability to turn awareness back upon itself represents a fundamentally different kind of cognition than exists in other species. This doesn't mean human consciousness emerged through non-natural processes. Rather, it suggests that natural processes sometimes produce genuinely emergent phenomena, developments that cannot be fully predicted or explained by examining their components in isolation. The mystery of human cognitive evolution isn't about finding some external intervention or exotic trigger. It's about recognizing that evolution itself contains the potential for transformative innovations. Moments when quantitative changes in complexity yield qualitative changes in capability. This perspective resolves many of the paradoxes we've encountered. It explains why similar intelligence hasn't evolved repeatedly despite similar environmental pressures on many species. Phase transitions require very specific preconditions and are inherently rare events. It explains the apparent delay between the evolution of anatomically modern brains and behaviorally modern humans. The neural hardware developed before the cultural software necessary to express its full potential. The lag represented an incubation period for the phase transition. Most significantly, it explains why conventional evolutionary theory struggles to account for human consciousness. Our theoretical frameworks were developed to explain gradual adaptations, not phase transitions. They're the wrong tools for understanding genuine evolutionary discontinuities. This doesn't mean abandoning evolutionary theory, but rather expanding it to encompass phenomena that transcend its traditional scope. Just as quantum mechanics didn't invalidate classical physics, but revealed its limitations at certain scales, we need a more comprehensive framework for understanding cognitive evolution. The pattern that emerges suggests human consciousness represents something genuinely new in Earth's history, not just more complex cognition, but awareness that has crossed a threshold into qualitatively different territory. This isn't human exceptionalism or theological special pleading. It's recognition that evolution occasionally produces genuine novelty, developments that transform rather than merely elaborate what came before. The strongest evidence for this interpretation comes from the cultural explosion that followed the emergence of modern human cognition. In evolutionary terms, the past 50,000 years of human history represent an unprecedented acceleration of complexity and capability. No other species has transformed its environment, developed cumulative culture, or expanded its ecological niche to the extent humans have. The difference isn't just one of degree, but of kind. We operate within a fundamentally stricter environment than any other species. This perspective also helps explain why artificial intelligence research has found it so challenging to replicate human consciousness. If consciousness represents an emergent property arising from specific neural architectures and developmental processes, it may not be reproducible through digital computation alone. The most profound implication of this pattern concerns the future. If human consciousness represents a phase transition in awareness, it suggests we may be early in this new evolutionary trajectory rather than its culmination. The transformation may be ongoing. Just as early multicellular life represented only the beginning of a vast evolutionary radiation, human consciousness may represent just the initial emergence of a new kind of awareness in the cosmos, one that could develop in directions we cannot yet imagine. This doesn't mean future changes will follow the same pattern as past evolution. With the emergence of consciousness capable of directing its own development, future cognitive evolution will likely involve intentional self-modification rather than natural selection alone. Technologies from genetic engineering to brain-computer interfaces are already beginning to open pathways for such self-directed evolution. Whether these developments represent promise or peril depends entirely on how wisely we navigate them. The central insight is that human consciousness represents not an endpoint, but a beginning, the emergence of awareness capable of comprehending and potentially directing its own future development. We stand at the early stages of a cosmic process, potentially as significant as the emergence of life itself. This perspective transforms our understanding of human nature and potential. We are not merely clever apes who developed unusually large brains. We represent the universe becoming conscious of itself. Matter organized in ways that generate awareness, capable of contemplating its own existence. This isn't mysticism, but an emergent scientific understanding of consciousness as a genuine cosmic development, rather than merely an adaptation for survival. It suggests human awareness may have significance beyond our particular evolutionary history. If consciousness like ours represents a genuine phase transition, it may be extraordinarily rare in the cosmos, not because life is rare, but because the specific conditions required for this particular transition may occur only occasionally across vast stretches of space and time. This possibility carries profound ethical implications. If conscious awareness of our kind represents something genuinely new and rare in cosmic evolution, its preservation and development may have significance beyond our planet or species. The mystery of human cognitive evolution thus opens into an even greater mystery. What might consciousness become? Our emergence represents a phase transition in awareness. Might there be further transitions ahead? Modes of consciousness as far beyond our current experience as ours is beyond earlier hominins. The evidence suggests such possibilities cannot be dismissed. The same evolutionary processes that produced the explosion of the human brain continue to operate. The same capacity for emergent complexity that generated consciousness from neural architecture remains active in cultural and technological evolution. What began as a scientific investigation into brain expansion thus culminates in a profound recognition. The human mind represents one of the most extraordinary developments in cosmic history. Awareness evolved to the point of comprehending its own evolution. And this recognition itself represents the next step in that process. Consciousness becoming aware of its own significance and contemplating its possible futures. The greatest mystery may not be how we evolved, but what we might yet become. As our exploration of the mysterious human brain explosion concludes, we find ourselves not with definitive answers, but with a deeper appreciation of the profound questions our cognitive evolution raises. We have pushed beyond simple narratives into the genuine wonder that scientific investigation at its best can provide. The tripling of our ancestors' brain size over a relatively brief evolutionary span represents something genuinely extraordinary, a development whose full explanation may require expanding our conceptual frameworks. Rather than merely gathering more data within existing paradigms, What seems increasingly clear is that human consciousness represents more than just another adaptation. It appears to be a genuine phase transition in the evolution of awareness, comparable in significance to the emergence of life itself from non-living chemistry. This perspective transforms our understanding of human nature and potential. We are not merely the current endpoint of an evolutionary continuum, but potentially the beginning of something genuinely new in the cosmos. Awareness evolved to the point of comprehending and potentially directing its own future development. The mystery of our origins thus opens directly into the mystery of our possible futures. If consciousness like ours emerged through processes we still incompletely understand, what further developments in awareness might be possible either through natural evolution or through the technologies our consciousness has enabled us to create? As we contemplate these possibilities, we would do well to approach them with both scientific rigor and genuine humility. The emergence of the human mind represents one of the most extraordinary developments in cosmic history. Understanding it fully may require wisdom as well as knowledge. Perhaps the most appropriate response to the mystery of our cognitive evolution is neither blind faith in conventional explanations, nor uncritical acceptance of exotic alternatives, but rather a willingness to dwell in the genuine wonder this mystery evokes. For in that wonder lies the truest expression of what makes human consciousness so extraordinary, our capacity to contemplate our own origins and to stand in awe before the profound mystery of existence itself. If you found this exploration of human cognitive evolution fascinating, consider subscribing to our channel for more journeys through the mysterious territories where science, philosophy, and wonder intersect. Together, we'll continue exploring the greatest mysteries of existence, guided by evidence but never afraid to venture beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding.